My neighbor's car is haunted. I just got back from the grocery store. I'm sitting in my car and I decided that I wanted to film my creepy story time in the car instead of being in my house talking about creepy things. Sitting in my driveway filming my video just in my own little zone when I see my neighbor come out. Mind you, my neighbors have never spoken to me from day one. The first day I moved in here, I ran into them outside and I went to say hello and they completely blew me off. Ever since then, I just don't interact with them. So I'm sitting out in my car and I see the husband coming out. He goes into his car a few times and he finally goes back into his house. He seems kind of annoyed that I'm in my car since our driveways are right next to each other. He finally just gives up going into his car and goes back into his house. So I'm sitting there, again, still filming my video. I happen to glance over at his car and I see this man sitting in his driver's side with the most menacing, evil look I've ever seen in my life, just glaring at me. I've always felt like something was off about them. This just confirmed. Creepy story time. So I decided to film in my car today because I want to give my house a break. This story was sent in by Erin. I tagged her down below. When she was in high school, she went off to a bowling tournament. Her and her friends used to play with Ouija boards a lot and they decided to take the board with them when they went off to the tournament. That night, 4 of the girls had their hands on the planchette. The minute they were all holding the planchette, it started to move. It spelled out help, cough, and stairs. It also spelled out one of the girls' names. She didn't want to share the name, but we're gonna go with the name Chloe. It then moved to the number section and it started counting down backwards. They all knew that this wasn't a good sign, so they all decided to say goodbye and stop playing. All of the girls ran downstairs and told the parents about it. Then one of the moms told them that Chloe's dad had recently passed away. He was an alcoholic who had fallen down the stairs while he was detoxing. They never messed with the board again. Creepy story time. The person who sent the story in wishes to remain anonymous. Shortly after her and her boyfriend got together, she became pregnant. They decided that they were going to get a house and start a life together. The first night that they were at their new house, she was asleep and her boyfriend was watching TV. Her dog started to go crazy. Her boyfriend saw what he described to be a massive wolf-like creature right outside their window. They both thought it was weird, but they decided to brush it off. The very next day, her boyfriend got laid off from work. A couple weeks later, while she was sleeping, her boyfriend sees the animal. The wolf-like animal walked up to the house, growled, and walked away. This was around 2:30 in the morning. The very next day, she almost has a miscarriage. About a week later, her boyfriend sees it now a third time. But this time, the animal showed up at around 11:30 at night. That very next morning, they wake up at 5 a.m. out of nowhere, completely out of energy, feeling really negative. They got into a huge argument, and she ended up miscarrying. Ever since that happened, the energy in the house became toxic. By this point, it's now December, and they decide that it's time to move. When they go to unpack one of their boxes at the new place, a snake slithers out of one of their boxes. There's absolutely no way to explain how a snake just made its way into one of their boxes. The house they ended up moving to is right across the street from the cemetery, so they still do experience a lot of activity, but nothing compared to how they felt at the old house. Till this day, the only way they can explain it is that whatever it was demonic. Ever since they moved out of that house, all the negative energy and all the toxicity that was going on in their environment completely went away. She said it felt like she was living in a negative bubble that just wanted to consume them both and break them up. It even affected the relationship that she had with other people around her. Whatever was in that house or is still in that house is so strong that they won't even visit the restaurant that they normally would go to because it's too close to the house. And even being that close to the house has an effect on them. Creepy story time. So this story was sent in by Grace. I will go ahead and tag her below. I consider the story to be especially scary because it's based on a real life bad person. I always say that I'd rather deal with the paranormal than deal with a real life evil person. So when Grace was about 14 years old, her dad was active duty. They were stationed in Germany. At that time, she used to live in a military base, which consisted of a bunch of buildings with numerous apartments. They lived on the 3rd floor. The family she used to babysit for lived on the 1st. So one day, Mrs. McIntyre, which is the family she used to babysit for that lived on the 1st floor, went up to her apartment and asked if she could babysit her kids. She said that her husband never came home the night before and she needed to go to work. Her dad gave her permission, so she went downstairs to stay with the kids. After a couple hours of her staying with the kids, Mr. McIntyre showed up. He came in really nervous. He was shaking. He looked pale. He paid her and told her to go home. Go to part 2.